Before we begin, because I can't see the room completely, who is here right now from the committee?
We have everyone present.
Everyone
Everyone's here,
physically
but
present?
Yes.
everyone but
Okay.
you.
I don't know about, is Ben on?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't see him on yet, so. That one for you.
And I also hear AJ and Chief Jenks.
Yep.
Is there anybody else in the room?
Dave and Ozzy and Mayor.
Oh, I mean, not the committee. You've already told me who's there for the
Oh,
committee.
okay. All right.
Oh, that's it for guests.
No, I didn't see him up, I didn't see him on the list there yet. All right. Here.
I did, yeah. You?
Hey.
Oh, yeah. Hard to.
Went back.
There was an email today with the spreadsheet on it, wasn't there?
For me?
Is that who it was from?
Yeah, if you're talking about the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, sure it is.
If you don't have it, I have it on my
I
thumb drive.
think I have it. This is, leave it, save it. Because you're not gonna use the one in the packet, right?
Correct. This one's
Okay.
condensed based on our
Let me
conversation.
just get it in a good place here. That's not the one.
Tim, do you just want it off my thumb drive?
No, I have it. I just opened the wrong one.
Okay.
It's this one here, right?
Yes,
Yep.
with the arrows on it.
Yeah, all right, let me get it queued up here. All right, have this, and, that. Okay, I've got my act together as much as I can.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, I don't know. I heard it. You have master chords? I do.
Oh, things get pull on the wrong one and
Yeah.
have
I
hear
don't
from
want to
John.
unplug it because God only knows what'll happen when I plug it back in. How you doing? Good, how are you? Good.
Dave, I'm gonna give Ben just a minute or two.
Okay.
Well, then I will unplug it. See what happens when I plug it back in. It'll be the same way. This thing here.
I just saw them pop up, so. Let us call to order a meeting of Finance Committee, February 28th, and we have a quorum present. So we are in compliance with open meetings law as that was posted. I don't see anybody for a public comment, and I don't see anybody else non-committee that would be online here. So then we'll go straight into the communications. Does anybody have any communications? I know Dave's got plenty.
Not as much as last time.
True. All right, go ahead, Dave.
Okay, well, True by Hilton, once again, is delinquent in property taxes. What's up on the screen, that $5,700, that is second quarter interest and penalties. We maxed out for the penalties already for that year, so we couldn't charge any more. Third quarter, they did pay on a timely basis, but fourth quarter 22, which was due January 31st, they're still delinquent on. So I guess once I know the fourth quarter amount, we can add on the interest and penalties, but personal opinion, I would keep this in mind with Forward Development Group and asking for a change in zoning for some properties. That's about all that we can hold over their head right now. Any question on delinquent room taxes?
Nope, the story's getting old, though.
Yes, it is.
I think you just answered this, but so that is, I mean, other than the interest, and, you know, financial penalties, there's nothing, you know, in terms of state law or anything else like that that we can do, Dave?
The next thing that we can do is the liquor license, which would be issued July 1.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, switching to WIBIC, Wisconsin Women's Business. They actually do the collection on our behalf for the revolving loan fund for the redevelopment authority. And they were going, I think they're still going through it, but they've had some issues in accounting where they actually owed us April through December for collections. That finally has gotten paid, so they're current again, but we'll have to be watching them pretty closely going into the future. Any questions on that?
Did they elaborate what they think was causing the delays, or?
From what I understand, they had a unplanned retirement of a high-level financial person, and they are very short in accounting staff. So I don't think it was anything that, any malfeasance or anything like that. I think they just were behind in sending out the payments. So once I kind of put my foot down and said, when am I going to get paid? Within about 2 weeks, we got the money.
All right. Thanks for the diligence.
Next topic is vested employees pay. This is kind of just a FYI for the committee. In the past, the city has always accounted for vested sick leave. But when I was running the calculations for vested sick leave, I noticed that we had balances out there for vacation that's being carried forward, comp time that wasn't paid out, and floating holiday for the police department that was not used yet. So that was about an additional 119,000 that we needed to book in the government-wide statements. So it doesn't affect the departments with the exception of EMS and stormwater utility. But everybody else, they're just in the government-wide statements. So this is just kind of more of an FYI for everybody. any questions that anybody has on that topic?
Dave, is this something then with, as you're changing up the accounting a little bit with the departments, is this going to prevent that from happening, or we'll be able to better keep track of it in the future?
Well, now that we've got it in the balance sheet for the accounts payable or accrued liability, part of the year-end process, when you're looking at every balance sheet account, it's like, okay, what was the balance last year? Did it change this, at year-end? And obviously, if we see no change, that means that we forgot to do an entry. So that's kind of our checks and balances.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay. On to reports. For the December 2022 financial reports, I left that on there just in case I was going to bring up anything specific for departments, but I didn't see anything that I needed to bring your folks' attention to right now. The next one, cash summary by fund for 2022. This is actually the entire year, and so I did this so that we could see what happened to our cash and investments throughout the entire city. We went down about $1.2 million in cash. Sounds like a lot of money, but if you look at the next page there, Tim, in the box there, I show the areas where we planned or actually went down and cashed some large ticket items. For instance, the library, the 22 budget planned on using 56,739 in fund balance, so obviously our cash would go down by that. The infotech, we had that money, and I think it was Fund 412 for IT that had just been sitting there. So when we closed that fund, the council said, yes, go ahead and spend that, so we spent it. The Affordable Housing Fund, we used $250,000 in 22 for remodeling of 4 apartment units. Sick leave payouts, we had 4 people who left us, all in the police department, and a hefty amount was paid out to all those individuals. So that was a large amount of cash that went out the door there too. The next 2 items are for ARPA, so we paid out $235,000 in ARPA funds. So you take all that into account, our cash really went down only $366,000, which isn't a lot of money considering you're talking $28 million. So it's more just kind of a FYI for you folks. So any questions on the 22 cash at all?
Nope, we just kind of gloss over all those. The more zeros you add to them, then we just like gloss them over.
Yeah, I know what you mean. When I was working for the state at ETF, the numbers were huge. You just had to get used to more commas.
Yep.
Okay, and then the rest of the reports from 6D, the cash summary by fund, through 6M, revenues and expenditures. I really didn't see anything that stood out. And to be honest, January financial reports don't mean a lot because we barely begun the year. But any questions anybody had on any of those reports?
I just had a couple things I was curious about, and I'm not sure if you're even going to know offhand. There was over $59,000 to North Shore Bank. I'm just curious if you know who those are.
Yeah. North Shore Bank is the health savings account for our retired employees. So that $59,000 is part of that $224,000 that was paid out for sick leave payouts.
And then my next one is definitely just curiosity. Wasserman Music, I took a wild guess that had something to do with setting up the Rotary music, but I have no idea. That was just a guess.
I'm strictly guessing the Opera House, but I can look into that for you.
Oh, it's not that big a deal. That could be,
Okay.
I didn't know if that was, if those funds came out, those were like separated, or if they were actually to the artist, so.
Yeah, again, I'm assuming that is a deposit that the Opera House did because they were doing quite a lot of deposits in the past month.
Oh, sure. Yeah, don't waste time on it. Thank you, though.
Okay, you're welcome. Well, Brett, I'm sorry to tell you, but I'm done with all my reports.
All right, I mean, there was one in there, but it was, again, it was kind of down in the weeds to ask about, and I don't remember where. I know it was on one of the reports, but again, it's not, wasn't anything earth-shattering or.
Well, if you remember what it is, you can email me and I'll certainly look into it.
Sure thing. All right, does anybody have any other questions, comments on the reports? Until I can remember which, it was like one line out of, all of these, anyway. All right, then, if no questions, then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the February 14th meeting.
So move.
Motion by Dave, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ozzy. Any questions, edits? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
And are any opposed? All right, minutes are accepted. Item 8 is a discussion and possible action regarding a reallocation of room tax tourism agency amounts, referred in back from the council at the February 14th meeting.
Correct. If you remember, at the February 14th meeting, the council approved increasing room tax from 6% to 8%. And Matt Dragney brought up a comment that by statute, we can keep 70%, or pay out 70%, and keep the remainder of 30% for ourselves. Currently, right now, we pay 90% out and keep 10%. So, Brett, you directed that we bring this back to finance, and I'll leave it at that.
All right. So what would, let's see, do you know what the net differences would be? I mean, to go to the 8%, what that split between the 70 and the 90 would be? How much we would pocket one way or the other?
I'd have to calculate that out for you, but this is, the allocation of 70 versus 90 has really nothing to do with the rate going from 60% to, or 6% to 8%. It's referring to the fact that between Stoughton Visitor Services and Stoughton Chamber of Commerce, they get 90%, and of all revenue, we could potentially only give them 70%. So we'd be cutting those two agencies from 90 to 70.
Oh, which, I mean, I don't know if I want to do that, but. So the move.
I would say at least want to calculate what the 90% of the 6% of the old rate was versus the 70% of the 8% to make sure that we don't mess up the budget of the
Cutting
Chamber
them
of
short or
Visitor
us short,
Services.
so.
We'd want to at least know that
Well,
much.
Just talking out loud, I think we had about 120,000 in revenue, but let's just call it 100,000 for easy math. So each 90% means that we would pay out, well, okay, no, you're talking the increased revenue. So 100,000 and you're gonna increase it by 25%. So that would give us 125,000. So of that additional 125,000, you're talking about 18,000 in round figures that we're paying, we would be increasing to those entities. So if I'm understanding correctly, you'd like me to actually do those calculations to see, based upon the increased tax rate going up from 6 to 8, and then what would be the effect of then dropping them from 90 to 70, and what's the difference between those two sums? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's like a big min-max problem, but we just want to see what those rates would be. I mean, at least then we've got all the numbers out there to look at.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I'd agree. I'd like to see, I don't know that I'd, want to just hand over the extra 2%. I've always been a little bit grumbly that we cover everything, and maybe that's necessary, but, I think we pay all of the, building costs, right? And the, the heat and the repairs when it needs a new roof. So if there's an opportunity to, to continue to help them and fund them, but maybe recoup a bit of that if it's fair. So, yeah, I think having the true numbers would probably be helpful.
okay, I can do that analysis and bring it back to the committee at the next meeting.
Yeah, and you might also, as long as you're at it, just kind of take a look at the, kind of the pre and during and post-COVID collections. Because they
That
took
would
a
be
hit
really
during
hard to
that.
do because True by Hilton came in, and that really skewed the numbers.
Yeah, well, it might be something that you and, Callie can talk about too, because, they were obviously affected, by the pandemic with, people weren't staying in the hotel. And, the visitor services especially rely on that revenue to do the marketing here in Stoughton.
What I
So-
could do is look at pre and post-COVID, excluding the True by Hilton, which would be a smaller percentage, but, and I'm just gonna throw out numbers, let's just say that revenue went down by 12%, then we'd know what COVID cost.
And I don't know how many members they have or what they collect from their members, or if they have made any changes in those fees. Again, it may or may not be relevant, but it'd be helpful to know, because I just don't have any idea, the membership numbers, fees, anything like that, if that's available.
Yeah, the hotel tax revenue goes right to visitor services. So that,
And chamber.
yeah, a little bit to the chamber, but mostly visitor services. And visitor services, that's really what they rely on, is for that part of the position. Whereas the chamber also, gets membership,
Yeah.
dues from the chamber members. So I think that once you get it calculated, Dave, maybe we can get together with Callie and at least make sure that we're all on the same page, so, they're not surprised.
Okay. I'll give them a heads up then,
And
that
then we
it's
can-
being considered at next finance.
Yeah, we can bring it back.
Because we have
So do we-
until, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ozzy.
So do they get to keep 90% of the penalty too?
No, the penalty and interest is, by the revised ordinance, is 100% city.
It's basically to cover our time and effort, and I don't know if there's any pain and suffering included, but
Dale will be looking for a bonus.
All right, is that enough guidance on there, Dave, to,
Yes, I know what you folks are looking for.
all right. It'd also be interesting to note if that other, that Downtown Business Association also, if that had any, I mean, I know they're not getting any money from us, but if that had any bite on the Chamber of Commerce, if that took some of their membership out or
I don't
not.
think so.
No.
Not at this point. They're working collaboratively at this
That's
point.
what I thought. It seemed to be amenable.
Yep. I think they're defining their roles, and they're not trying to duplicate services.
Right. Okay. Any other questions on the room tax ordinance until we see the min-max numbers on those? All right. Next bit up is the resolution for approval of the police department restructure. Now, half of you all will get to see this for the first time, and half of you will get to see it for the second time.
Can I move to recommend to council?
In less than 24 hours. There you
Yeah.
go.
There we go. You want to start with this one?
Sure, that would be a good place to
All
start.
right. I'll try to get it so it's, you can see it.
We'll just move to, recommend
Vote to
council.
recommend.
So we don't have to listen to AJ.
Yeah. I'm actually going to, if we're ready, are you going to read the resolution, Brett?
In council, yeah.
Okay, so we
In
don't have to do it here?
or- No.
Okay, so I think the big thing, I'm going to have Chief talk, but we have gone through this almost ad nauseum to make sure that what we're doing here is the right thing for the future of the police department, not only for today, but as we expand and grow, taking into consideration all the future growth within the city and making sure that we're appropriately staffed and taking into consideration some growth opportunities with potentially an SRO and redefining our CSO position as well. I think the big thing I want to say before I turn it over is with this change here, we start with 23 badges and we end with 23 badges. So what we're doing is internal promotions and changes. So if you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to jump in. Dan, I'll turn it over to you, Chief.
Thank you. Just a brief history of the police department. We've ranged through the years from having numerous people at the command staff level. We also have the chief, of course, leading, followed by our lieutenants, and our lieutenants have ranged from 1 to 2 lieutenants. And in my plan here, I would be adding a second lieutenant, which is a similar structure that we incorporated in 2014 and continued through 2019, at which time we went back to a 1 lieutenant model. And as you look at this structure, you'll see in this example that we would have 2 lieutenants, and the sergeants would be kind of redefined in some respect, as we would continue to have 4 sergeants, 3 designated as patrol sergeants, and then the addition, which you're going to consider tonight, is a detective sergeant. So those are the 2 basic changes. They're really nothing really new or extravagant. Our detectives have ranged in numbers from 1 to 3. Typically, it's been 2 on staff. And there's always been an informal leader. What I'm trying to accomplish is to have a formal leader that is responsible for directing not only the investigations, but also some of the other entities within the police department, including all of our evidence and our school resource officer is in the mix. I would see that also falling under the detective sergeant, as well as our community service officer. The idea here is to become more efficient and identifying our workflow and being able to identify a path for each of our tasks. Currently, we're a little organized in some respects. As all of our, at the bottom of the chart, you don't really see what we do and all the tasks we have. And those tasks have to work their way through this chart to be accomplished. Right now, in our current situation, there's not a real defined column or path for those tasks to be addressed. And under this model, I feel that we would be able to direct our workflow and become more efficient. Also, in looking at this, with the additional leadership positions, I would believe it would we'd become overall more effective and a safer organization. It would provide for more on-site supervision by our sergeants, as a second, or I should say additional lieutenant, would be able to address a lot of the administrative tasks that some of the sergeants are experiencing now. There's just a lot of paperwork and report review, and I would much rather see our first-line supervisors back in that role where they're on scene at the call and be able to help our younger officers. Currently, right now, as we sit, we have 5 officers that have been employed at the police department 13 months or less. So 1/3 of our patrol staff is really new to police and inexperienced. So freeing up our sergeants in patrol will also afford that opportunity to coach at the street level. Another idea in this restructure is retention. The city spent a lot of time talking about retention, rightfully so, and addressing it last year as we wage corrections and generous pay increases. There's other things too. I know along the lines of the officers and dispatchers have talked about the health coverage. That's a big thing to stay here. There's a lot of other reasons than just the hourly wage, and I believe that increasing our leadership responsibilities and kind of coming up with a different organizational chart, it affords more opportunity for movement within the organization. And again, another reason to stay there. I talk to my staff frequently about these changes. They're all very supportive of it. Everyone kind of is excited about some of the things that we can control within it, and feel that we'd be a better police department with these, and if this does occur, I guess, if this happens.
Can you talk a little bit about electronic evidence and the increase?
Yeah, so as things change in like policing, like everywhere, we've seen such a change in just our sheer evidence, the amount of evidence that we gather. Now keep in mind that we are all equipped with body cameras, and all our squads have cameras and recorders in them as well. All that information has to be kept, processed, it's downloaded. Then, what really gets interesting is for sharing that information through records requests, whether it be with the courts or an individual citizen. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of things that have to happen before it can just be released to a citizen. Perhaps names have to be redacted, and what's coming about now is actually video has to be redacted. So, like, as far as this, as far as redacting, that is something we're just beginning to explore for digital evidence, and that's, I guess, I don't know if I want to talk about each individual position, if you want it all.
I think we can just do the overview, if
Okay.
they're okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Heads up.
The only thing I have is just a quick question about the SRO. I know that you've had discussion with the school district regarding that. I just wondered if the school district does change their mind and they reinstate the SRO, do we have that in our budget to cover that?
Not currently, but then it's like that conversation
So
will
if it was to be reinstated this year for the next, the next spring or fall, I guess, how would we cover that?
we'd have to have an agreement in place.
Yeah, we would have an agreement with the school district, and Brett probably remembers better than I do. They have a different fiscal year than we do, so I would believe they would actually, their budget comes first. Is that accurate?
Theirs comes first, yeah.
So we don't even know what the split would be. In the past, it's been 25-75, but I would assume that would be up for discussion.
Yeah.
So we would need to even know what we're talking percentage-wise.
Yeah, I understood that there's
Yeah,
a
I
split,
think-
but I'm just wondering if if we were planning somehow to put some money aside for that or not. Otherwise, we would have to just take it out of the general fund.
And we know they're having conversations, and Dan's attended their culture and climate committees. So one of their school board's goals was to review the SRO position. I don't know if they've reached a decision point yet.
No, it's still in the discussion phase. And I did, just to be clear, it's vacant as I illustrated on the chart, but that's where it would fall in. If it ever does.
It's just a holding position. Yeah.
Yep.
I think the other piece that we missed here is when you're looking at that detective sergeant, it is on the right-hand side, but that position is fluid and would be augmenting and assisting with the other sergeants in the event that somebody's off or there's an absence or that we need to cover.
Yep.
So they're completely cross-functional positions. And the
As-
same thing at the lieutenant level.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, so we want everyone to be very versatile and be able to jump in as need be. And I guess really when you look at this restructure, it also sets us up for succession. As things happen, if we have any retirements, injuries, someone leaves for another job, we're in a little better, well, a lot better position leadership-wise than we were, for instance, last year.
So any other questions on the positions themselves or what the structure looks like? Dave? Oh, okay.
Yeah, Dave, Ozzy, and Ben, I mean,
Yeah.
we've seen this one last night, so, if you guys have questions,
Well, just,
you
just
can't
the
have more questions.
Well, it's the same one I had last night for Dave. And as I said in personnel, I mean, I think the setup and the structure makes sense, but I'm just curious about funding going forward in 2024. If there's a recommendation, Dave, on how it will be funded, or?
Well, based upon these numbers, you're looking at ballpark $10,000 for the rest of the year, so let's call it 15 to round it up for next year with pay increases. Considering the police department has a budget of $3 million plus, I'm not worried about adding 15,000 to that department. We're obviously got to figure it out, but I'm not going to sweat bullets about it right now. If it was $15,000 for, say, my department, okay, then it's a little bit harder to justify, but we've got a lot of estimates in for overtime and everything else,
Right.
and as the year shakes out, we could be good. So I don't have a good answer for you, Lisa, but I'm not concerned about 15,000.
Okay, yeah, and I know the overtime itself varies a lot, so I know your budget is fairly variable anyway, but
Right.
that's good to know, so, thanks.
So that's a good lead-in to the chart that the mayor pulled up. Can you, we want to start with the sergeant position to fill the lieutenant, if you could scroll up. Yep. Dan, do you want me to walk through this, or do you want to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So in this position, what we're looking at is, this would be, like we said, we're starting with 23 badges. We'll be ending with 23 badges when this is done. Everything, again, is internal promotions. So it would make most sense that from our sergeant area, we would be filling that lieutenant position with someone coming out of that category. So we already have gone through a hiring process. We have a list from the PFC of approved individuals. So this number here is quite solid. Looking at the lieutenant pay rate at $50.48, the current sergeant that we're looking at is at $43.97, which gives you a difference of $6.51 per hour. Calculated that based on hopefully getting an approval tonight and being able to implement that at the start of the payroll. So I came up with 1,680 hours for the remainder of the year. Take that, multiply it out, you include in there FICA costs, WRS, and total wages. The cost difference on that comes to $13,219. And then, as we were just talking about with Alder Reeves, we have some overtime in there that we're hoping through this rearrangement of duties and responsibilities that we would be able to pull 25%, taking into consideration those 4 individuals that we have listed here, which would be O'Neill, Johnson, Hoper, and Olson. Those are your sergeants that we looked at before, and that would give us a savings of a total of $16,776.51. Keep in mind, there's no guarantee there. Somebody going out, an officer injury, a baby being born, we may end up having overtime. But in the perfect world, this would be the scenario, is that we would have a positive difference of an overage of $35.57.20. So let's call it zero. So it would it's a no. The next one is looking at taking an officer and promoting them into the detective sergeant position, again, starting with 23 badges, ending with 23 badges. More than likely, that would be detective pay, which is the third scenario on there on the bottom where you can see the orange above the blue line, taking that existing detective at $39.49 and promoting them into the detective sergeant. The only reason I made that assumption is that when you look at the qualifications, the person in the leadership role, or shall we say the sergeant's role, has to have that detective background, and we don't have that. We only have one detective at this time. So taking that scenario and looking at that, you're taking the detective rate of pay at $39.49, taking the sergeant's wage, you come up with a difference of $3.02. Using the same exact math, taking the 1,600 hours and adding in the FICA, the WRS, you come up with a difference of $6,132.46. So there's your difference. And then the last one, this would be taking an officer and putting them into the detective role. Same exact type of math there. I took the officer pay promoting to detective at the higher rate just because that would make most sense, is that we would have more of a senior person moving forward for these what-ifs. Comes to a difference of $1,990. So the total cost for those two positions comes to $8,122.46. And then if you take the lieutenant promotion into consideration, like I said, there's a positive, but we can't bank on that overtime. So that would be zero. So it would null itself out. Any questions on how we arrived at that? Ben, I can't see you.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. Are you good, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else you'd like to add to that, Chief?
No, I think, it's a minimal increase in costs, and I do think it does lend itself to everything we mentioned previously. It's a good move.
So again, just to wrap this up, the reason that we're asking for these changes is to set the department up and have the chief in a position where he has individuals below him in a structure that allows our greener officers coming in to have hands-on training with a sergeant, and then to have that second lieutenant handling lieutenant jobs. Right now, one of the things we didn't talk about is you're going to see pushed down further. You have sergeants doing potentially lieutenants' work, lieutenants doing officer or sergeant's work, and that ties back into what Chief had said in regards to duties not being where they really
Right.
belong. So we want to make sure that we're getting those into the appropriate areas.
Just one quick question then. Do you have a matrix or some type of methodology set up to determine whether the moves that we're making, sometime in the future, you'll be able to look at this and see that it is actually doing what you hoped it was doing?
Boy.
By increasing the efficiency?
Yeah,
Something.
not
Or is it
really.
just going to be
It's going to be a
gut feel?
check at, as things go on, and maybe we have to adjust or shuffle things a little around to make it more efficient. It's just so hard because we don't produce a project. I remember Chief O'Connor back in the day, we don't make widgets.
Yeah,
We
there's-
can't show you what we do.
There's no black and
Yep.
white
Yep.
to tell because we're working at people doing a
Yes.
job rather
Yep.
than producing.
One of the things that the mayor asked of this was that we have a measurable for the overtime. And so Dan's going to try to figure something out there. We don't have a measurable yet, but we'll at least be able to show what the OT is through the monthly reports.
Yep. Yep.
Frankly, I have no idea how you would do that, but if you can come up with a way, that would really,
Yep.
that would really be great.
Yeah, I think what you'll find is operationally, they'll be able to report out the efficiencies. It might not be noticeable to you or I,
Yeah.
but it'll be very noticeable in the building and even in the community. We will be able to do things. One of the things that Chief would like to do is, more customer service type things. He can explain what that might look like better than I can.
Yeah.
And I think those are some things that could be measured.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and that brings me back to our conversation, Mayor, where we talked about victims of crimes, where we kind of just are at the point we don't really have anybody assigned to check back on them, because we see some people that have been victimized numerous times, and we don't really have the opportunity to follow up. We don't have anybody assigned. Where in this case, that additional lieutenant spot and the detective sergeant would be able to track that more, and we'd put some emphasis on following up with some of our victims of crimes.
I think that's really important, so I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Chief, when you're reporting in hours, it's just X number of hours worked per day, right?
Yes. Yep.
So there's no differentiation between any things in there, like, because I wondered if maybe you could try it like with the lieutenants, where they might be able to categorize how their hours are. I'm just trying to think of how you would maybe create a matrix to be able to track.
We do currently have in our time system, we're able to track grants. So
Okay.
that may be something that we could talk about, that possibly through the time system that we could add some lines on.
Right,
I mean, it would be definitely exploring what we're able to do and how we would have to set that up. But by all means, I think that's something we could look at.
Just an
I-
idea
I-
to throw out on that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah, it's true. We'd like to really measure our success or, any
But-
growth we
It would
see.
be
And another area I think will be the training. I think you'll be able to measure the amount of training that you'll do, which is really important with our less seasoned officers.
Yep.
But the thing is that with adding that additional work, I wouldn't want to take away from what your actual job is. That's the catch.
Yeah,
Right.
The catch 22, I guess you'd say.
you bet.
I get categorized to death where I am, where I have to parse everything out, and I keep telling them that they need to create a category of me tracking how I spend my time. Anyway, I don't want to get to that stage.
Right.
But if it would be something that would be a little bit, broad categories, like are you doing, are you on the street, are you flying your desk, are you, flying the drone?
Right,
that
gotcha.
kind of-
Yeah.
Anyway, just
And-
broad categories.
And really, I mean, we do get feedback from our citizens, and we'll probably hear some. They'll maybe notice some of the changes, especially when it comes to following up with victims. I think we'll have some positive feedback.
Make sure you bring those in and share those.
Yes,
with us.
absolutely.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, does anybody have any further questions on on the restructure portion of it?
I'd make a motion to recommend to council.
All right, motion by Greg, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ozzy. Any other questions regarding the restructure as presented? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
And are any opposed? All right, we will recommend the restructure to the council later tonight. Next bit in is the police lieutenant position description.
Okay, so what we're doing here is actually resurrecting the position description from 2014. Chief and I went through the position description, looked at the duties. We had very few changes. If you look on the lieutenant position, in fact, I'm not even seeing any redlining in that one. So that
No.
one we took as is.
Yep.
So all we're asking is to be able to re-implement that job description as is, and we need that in order to be able to hire for the position. So we need a motion on that one unless there's questions.
I'll make a motion to recommend to council.
Second.
And a second by Lisa. Anybody have any questions on that one? This one's pretty simple. all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend the lieutenant position description to council
Brett, I'm
later
sorry,
on.
who made the motion? I got Lisa's second.
Greg,
Me, Dave.
Greg?
Yep.
Thank you.
all right, next item up is the detective sergeant position description.
So this also is taking an existing position description, adding the word detective in front of it. As we talked about, these positions mirror each other across the board. The only thing that we did on this one is on page 2, we added the community cameras and maintains and tracks evidence, as Chief explained to you, as well as the squad and body cameras, maintaining and tracking that digital evidence. Other than that, that position stays as is and would mirror the other sergeants.
Is that one only the digital evidence, Chief, or is that digital and physical evidence?
And physical, so it would include incorporating our evidence room downstairs would be part of their duty.
Okay, all right. And then I didn't see anything in here, I mean, not that your organization is gonna present the cross-training abilities between the two lieutenants in there. I didn't see anything hardwired into this, but,
It's not in the position description, it's an expectation from the
Philosophy,
chief.
yep.
got it. So that's an understanding on hiring or taking the position that this is a cross-trained-able position.
Bet.
Perfect. All right, does anybody have any questions on the detective sergeant description?
I'll make a motion to recommend to council.
Motion by Greg,
Second.
second by Lisa. Any other questions? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
And are any opposed? All right, we'll recommend the detective sergeant position later to council. That runs us through our items at hand. We still have our A through Delta, I think, now. Are we in the Greek letters yet for our future agenda items?
Well, I do have to add one for at least
Yep.
discussion, because we've got a policy about selling any county property over 500 has to come to council. That probably needs to get adjusted to
Yep.
a higher value.
Yeah, I was thinking about that one also when I saw the property adjustment on that one, so,
We also intend on giving the finance committee an update on the housing authority in
Okay.
Greenspire. We're going through a process right now, and then Dave will be putting together a summary for this group, so at least you understand what's going on over there. But basically, we're doing a rehab project out there through a WIDA tax credit. If we're awarded the tax credit with the partners we're working with, so that would be a future agenda item as well.
yeah, that one was complicated, but,
It still is complicated.
Yeah,
sure.
it's getting a little more clear.
Mm-hmm. All right, anybody else want to add anything? I mean, we've still got letters left. All right, if not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Dave, second by Greg. Anyone want to add anything else, last minute? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thanks, everybody.
You want to
Thank
change
you.
to the next one? You good with how we?
You must have a